So far, it's been from Hobart, travelling up the River Derwent to New Norfolk, where I explored the river from that area. And then it was back down to check out the river from this area. And now, I just want to get one last look at the river. This time, from somewhere a bit higher. This is the shot tower, and it's going to give me the best views of town. Entry fee is $4.50. There's 259 steps, but I've been guaranteed it's worth every one of them. The shot tower was built in 1870 and was used to make shot for firearms. However, nowadays its primary use is to give us the splendid panoramic views of the Derwent River. It's a 20-minute drive back to Hobart to drop off the car, and I'm going to be calling it a day.
Now to a man who's a friend of the devil. The Tasmanian devil, that is. Biologist Stephen Smith has spent more than 20 years working with Tasmania's unique wildlife species, and his latest job has probably been the most challenging.
He's been at the forefront of the fight to save Tasmania's most famous marsupial, but that doesn't mean Stephen Smith gets special treatment. It's a marsupial in crisis. More than half the population has been wiped out, and yet the head of the devil disease team is leaving as an optimist about its future.
Delicious, she said. Nothing like a bit of government.
Devils came into Mr. Smith's life fairly late in his career. Tasmania's other iconic animal, the thylacine, albeit extinct, was his first love.
The most wonderful part was recording the oral history, interviewing people who were elderly then, in the 80s or more, who had actually held thylacine pups, who had actually fed tigers, who had first-hand experience of tigers, and that was sensational.
Because of his work on tigers, he was chosen from 200 candidates to be the Southwest World Heritage Area zoologist. It's hard to believe, but even in the early 1980s, very little was known of the species which inhabited the newly protected wilderness.
We knew it was special. Everybody knew that we were likely to find evidence of lots of links with Gondwana, but very few studies had been undertaken. There were studies on the lower Gordon River and preparing for the planned dam on the Franklin River, but apart from that, most of the area was unknown. It was especially great for me, having been arrested during the Franklin blockade, to then be able to work and contribute to management of the area.
In preparing for retirement, he found his long-lost bail document from those heated days. But despite the activism, he has a conciliatory approach to conservation.
I recognise that Tasmania has to find a balance between conservation and production. That I want my daughter and my granddaughters to be able to grow up and continue living here and working here. So I'm not one-eyed about it, but we also need to recognise that in terms of the whole world, Tasmania is a very, very special place, and we should be doing everything that we can to make sure that the wonderful natural areas are protected.
Stephen Smith spent 7 years heading up the private forest reserves program, which negotiated with farmers and other private landowners to conserve forests. The program ended in 2006, having protected 40,000 hectares. It was fortuitous that the work came to an end. About that time, it was decided that all the research being conducted on the devil facial tumour disease needed to be integrated. Taking on the job of program manager of the devil disease team was a daunting one.
We are dealing with a disease that's never been heard of before, anything like it, a lethal infectious cancer. Because there was so much work to be done in a hurry, and people wanted answers, and when answers weren't forthcoming, it was assumed that there must be secrecy and that information was known about that wasn't being released. But my impression was that everyone was just working so flat out. We didn't have the resources to get the information out as quickly as we'd liked.
The biologist says it's hard to know whether more funding should have been provided to the program because up until recently they didn't know exactly what they were fighting against.
Now we know, and now we can look to the future, and we've got a plan. We have developed a 5-year plan which, if we have sufficient funding, will enable us to do the things that are needed to make sure the devil doesn't become extinct and doesn't go the way of the thylacine. It appears that some devils in Western Tasmania may be genetically different enough to be able to recognise the tumour cells as being foreign and mount an effective immune response. It's too early to say if that's true, but there are encouraging signs to show that we need to do more research in this area, and this is, for me, it's one of the top priorities for the program at the moment to find out if there really is resistance among devils in the West.
While there's been concern about the possible impacts of chemicals on the fatty tissue of devils, he believes what has occurred is a serious